Welcome folks again. Mike Scott here with Farm Table. Our mission is to reconnect people to the land and farmers and local food. And we do that through education, training, and research. To build local food culture, we seek to build community, to support conservation, to build local food culture, and also teach the craft of local cooking. And one of my favorite quotes that relates to our mission really is Wendell Berry's, and he says, "How we eat determines to a considerable extent how the world is used." How we eat determines to a considerable extent how the world is used. So if in a way we can vote with our forks, with the kind of food we eat, helps create the kind of world we want to live in. And so that's a lot of what we're about. We are delighted to have Terry here, one of our favorite instructors. Many of you know her, I bet, have taken classes with her. She's been with us since the beginning, has over 50 years of culinary experience and a lot of experience just right on the farm where she moved in the early 70s. Also worked for Head Start for almost 30 years. And Terry, we're delighted to have you with us again, and feel free to take it away.
All right, thank you. Welcome, everybody. If you want to type in where you're viewing us from, it's always interesting to know. Last time I know I had my sister from Denver, I was very surprised. She said this was the first class, so that was nice. I'm continuing our cakes. Swedish cream cakes is what I'm making, and because of this book that I bought about 3 years ago at the Swedish Institute, and it has just wonderful, wonderful cakes in it, and I've always wanted to make all the cakes in it. And like for this one, I didn't really have an excuse to try it and to make it, so I thought this was perfect because I've always wanted to make a Charlotte cake from scratch. So I will put this back here, and I will talk a little bit about the Charlotte cake is known for having ladyfingers, and then it can have sponge cake. It can be with just ladyfingers, and instead of also when you make your ladyfingers for the side of the cake, you can also make ladyfingers for the bottom. That is sometimes done. In the Swedish cookbook, they use a sponge cake for layers and the ladyfingers around the outside. If you don't want to make your own ladyfingers, you can buy these. These are quite dry and flavorless. They work really good for tiramisu because you're wanting to soak them in your coffee liqueur, and then they don't fall apart, where the homemade ones are very tender. And so for a cake like this, for a Charlotte, we like to make the ladyfingers. For a dessert like a tiramisu, the store-bought ones are, I think, more effective for that, and they don't fall apart. So I'm going to demonstrate the two cakes, the ladyfingers and the sponge cake. I don't know if any of you were here that I gave about a month ago. So I will go through the sponge cake and then the mousse. But we'll start with ladyfingers. It's one of the very oldest cakes in the world, which is just totally interesting to me. They started whipping eggs to make cakes in the 11th century. This was still the time of the Vikings, which is really interesting. They used different ingredients in the 11th century because flour was not the fine milled white flour. It was more coarse, and the whole idea of whipping your egg whites, they were always working to make a lighter product. And of course, sugar didn't come in until the middle of the 16th century. So the main sweeteners in the 11th century were honey and malt, maybe, things like that, berry juice. It's a very interesting folklore story that Peter the Great and his wife, the peasant Empress Catherine, so enjoyed ladyfingers while visiting Louis XV of France's castle for dinner that they purchased the baker and sent him off to St. Petersburg. They were going to have him and nobody else was. So I thought that was a pretty cool story. So to start your ladyfingers, and I tried to do a lot of the whipping ahead. Last time we had a lot of whipping going on and you can't really tell. It takes 10, 15 minutes, so just standing and waiting for that gets a little aggravating. So I have, if you have your recipes, we separated our eggs for the ladyfingers, and I whipped the egg whites with and then whipped the yolks till they sort of ribbon. And my ribboning is a little, not as much, but I did this ahead. So most of the stuff you do right away, but it's gonna be okay. Now we're gonna take our egg yolks and add our vanilla and a teaspoon of water. And I'm gonna mix that up. And then I'm gonna put all the flour in a sifter. Very interesting that I bought a brand new sifter because it was so shiny and pretty, and it broke on my first turn. So I'm back to my 1920 sifter, which will never break. So, okay. There we go. I'll just leave because I've got the other cake to do. Now we're just leaving this right here. We're putting it on top, and then we're not going to mix the flour in until we put the egg whites in. And I see they're melting a little bit. I am done with that. And then we're going to fold these both together.
Terry mentioned the recipes, folks. You should have received that. I emailed them out yesterday, but if you signed up today, I just emailed to those of you who signed up today a copy of some recipe and instructions Terry gave. No need to have those in front of you, but you should all have them by now if you want to reference those.
We're having, I'm using cake flour. This is Bob's Red Mill Extra Fine Pastry Flour. And the ladyfinger recipe does not have any leavening. It does have cream of tartar. Cream of tartar was the base for baking powder. It still is to some degree. Cream of tartar is the leftovers from making wine or even bottling your own grape juice, because I often bottled up a lot of quarts of grape juice, and when you go to get the grape juice, there will be these little white chunks at the bottom, and that's part of the process of working with grapes, and the cream of tartar will settle to the bottom. So I think we're pretty well mixed. Now, do you know what? I think I've got that flour. I'm just gonna add a little more flour because it's sat. You see, now everyone always says that baking, you know, you follow the recipe exact, and that should be, that everything in baking should be really precise. And to a point, I agree. But then sometimes you get the feel of the dough and you know what you want. And if it's just not quite right, then you do stuff. I think that would be good. Ladyfingers. We can take this one. No, that one. Okay, I took a sheet pan and a parchment, and I made lines across it. I don't know if you can see, but there are lines. So these are piping lines, and I have this great big nice piping pastry tube. And I'm going to, by putting your pastry tube in a jar like this, you can kind of do a hands-free, if you're lucky and it doesn't tip over. Don't use a plastic container, use something with a little weight, because you're going to try to put all this batter in.
Terry, we do have a question that came in.
Okay.
Related to that cream of tartar. Does that mean the cream of tartar is basically the yeast that is filtered out from the wine after it ferments?
Did you say yeast?
Does that mean the cream of tartar is basically the yeast?
You know, it has nothing to do with the yeast. It's a chemical reaction that makes little white hard chunks from heating the wine or the grape juice. And it's a byproduct of wine and making grape juice. And it has nothing to do with the yeast.
Thank you.
Okay, now, let's see, yeah. We're supposed to be steady of hand and focus our mind and pipe. It's said in the really big bakeries, they have piping contests. You want to bring that up? When I was in the Minnesota room pastry cook, we would have souffle contests, we would have piping contests. The record was in 3 minutes, 5 trays of these.
Oh, gee.
That's working hard.
What'd you say?
Now that's really all I made. I must have made a half a batch, but it's for demonstration here because we have more to go. Okay, so you have the idea of making your ladyfingers. Now they go into a 400-degree oven for 10 minutes. Powdered sugar, right here. You want to powder sugar them. And then you want to wait a minute. That'll kind of sink in a little bit, and then you want to powder sugar them again. Okay. Now we're gonna put this in to the oven and set the timer. Okay. Maybe rinse that out and then I'll take it back. Maybe. All right. Okay. That's all there is to ladyfingers. It's very simple, and they just come up wonderfully. I'll run out of the picture here for that. These are the ones I made yesterday, some of them. And maybe this and this. And then we will work with these. I will show you what they'll do in a little bit. Second, we're going to make the sponge cake and get that baking as well. Okay, and since I have here the egg yolk mixture, which has the egg yolks and granulated sugar. And what we've done is put it here. You get the water boiling, you shut the water off, and then it's warm enough to melt the sugar. And then you just keep stirring. And I think I'm done with that. And we're, now This one I'm just going to beat just a minute more, but it's pretty thick and lemony already. We probably wouldn't have to. By melting the sugar, we keep the batter warmer, which is interesting in that it all adds to your final cake, how it's going to bake, how moist it's going to be. It will not take as long to beat up. So now we're going to take a third of the egg whites. It's interesting to do this a little bit ahead. They're not entirely the way you want them. At least you don't have to listen to the mixer. You want to lighten your batter by folding. Does that tray have flour? Yes. Okay. And we always sift for cakes. Always, always, always. Because you don't have lumps, which most pastry flour has. It doesn't take as long to mix. The whole thing is keeping it light and aerated. So the flour goes in, the eggs go in. Rest of the eggs. And then again, we're mixing the whole flour with the egg yolks, so you have less chance of deflating your whites. What's over there in those two bowls? Okay. Vanilla. Oh. Okay. Vanilla. And you just want to get it all combined and it really helps if you have a spatula that's scooped out instead of a flat one. And then you want to have your pan all ready. You want to have your oven hot always. And so this is sprayed and it has a parchment on the bottom, and then you spray the parchment or butter. And this is a really nice moist sponge cake. Sponge cakes became popular around the 15th century with the introduction of baking powder. Previously, they were just whipped egg whites. I think both of these are done. Yeah. Okay. All right. So we will pop that in for 30 minutes. That's on those. Okay. So we have made ladyfingers, we have put together a sponge cake, which is just a basic cake. And now we're going to make our mousse. Always looking to history, always think the coolest thing, the history of mousse. Mousse was made also back to the 10th, 11th century, but they were always savory mousse, chicken mousse, rack of venison mousse, swan mousse, terrible, yeah, they did. But about the 17th century, they started with sweet mousses. And I would like to show this picture here. I don't know if you can see. That is Henri Toulouse-Lautrec, who, which you all know is a painter, of course, but he is often given credit for inventing the chocolate mousse. He was quite a chef in his day, actually published a cookbook called La Cuisine, and he loved to have people over and cook for them, and often people invited him to their place to cook. And of his special dishes were, he was known for his lobster Americain and his porpoise. I don't know how he fixed that. And he also did a kangaroo dish, he called it, but it wasn't kangaroo, it was mutton, and he shaped a pocket on it. And for dessert, he made what he called chocolate mayonnaise, which is considered to be maybe one of the early sweet mousses, which I just thought was very interesting. So I'm going to use gelatin leaves. These are the silver perfected gel. I don't know if people are familiar with this. They come in sheets, like so. And for our purposes here, on the recipe, I put 2, which is what I used yesterday. Today, I'm going 3, because everything did set out, but it took a very long time. And so I think I will go with 3 today. And these you cut. So these are also organic. Most of the store gelatin that you get is not. It's like Knox gelatin, it's granule. You can use it. It's when things are made of hooks and things like that, I think it's kind of good to go with organic, because you never know what chemicals tend to store. And this takes a few minutes. Oh, ladyfingers. I'm going to give them a little more time. They're not quite, they're golden, but I feel like I'm a little bit more brown.
Hey, Terry, back to the,
Yeah.
the pan you were using. There's a question, is that a 9-inch springform pan or just a regular round cake pan?
That's a regular round 9-inch. What I'm using for the actual cake is a 10-inch springform. So we have room for the 9-inch round, and then we give ourselves an inch for the ladyfingers around the outside, and then you'll shortly be able to see what that is like.
And are you dipping that in water? The gelatin is just being dipped in
Yes,
water?
this is in ice cold water. I had some ice in here too. And it takes a few minutes, and it gets like this. And then I'm going to take I have here pureed raspberries and sugar. Oh, I forgot the butter. Didn't I? Okay. Got it. I forgot to put the butter in the cake, which goes in last, which is too bad, but it'll be fine. That's an extra cake. Okay. Now here I have 8 ounces of raspberries, and I've strained the seeds out. That's the best way to do it. You don't have to. If you like crunching into seeds, go for it.
And as far as the gelatin goes, Terry, where do you get the gelatin leaves or the powdered gelatin?
Powdered gelatin is in the store shelves, usually in the baking section. This gelatin leaves I order online. This comes from Germany.
Oh yeah, Joe's holding it up back there. It's a little hard to read. The video is a little fuzzy, but
Yeah, this is called perfected gel silver. There's also gold. Many people swear by gold. That's and I have silver. It seems okay. But I can order it from Amazon. It virtually comes the next day. So now I've added the sugar, half a cup of sugar to our cup of fruit puree. Now you just kind of squeeze it, see if it's soft. It is. Now we're just gonna put that right into our puree mixture there. And it will take about 2 minutes on the stove here. Now the Swedish cake book has many cakes that are thought of really for other cultures, primarily as a Charlotte cake is thought of as French. They do a Black Forest cherry cake. To each thing, they add some little different thing. And the thing that the Swedish cookbook adds to the Charlotte is white chocolate, which I think is a very, very nice addition. And so what I did was take the bottom layer of the cake and just melt the white chocolate and frost it with the white chocolate, put it in the freezer, let it set up really good for just a couple minutes, and then flip it over and then put it on the cake plate. That's one thing I need. There's a glass cake plate up there. I think it's next to the fruit bowl. Oh, right there.
Ladyfingers.
Yeah, I think they're done now. And there's about as many recipes for ladyfingers as you can imagine. There's our sponge cake is really wonderful. Maybe we could. I'll just show you. That's not quite as puffy as yesterday's, but I would leave that to the time that the egg whites sat. Maybe you can just take them and move them on. We don't need those today then. And you want to just stir this a little bit here, and then thankfully this takes you have to plan ahead for your mousse. And when I did these earlier this afternoon, I did a blueberry with the sugar and gelatin and a raspberry with the sugar and gelatin. And then you're at like 140 or something when you start this into bowls so it cools for you, because you can't add the whipped cream while it's hot. It just won't work. You'll just deflate everything and it won't be much of a mousse. So these are cooled down. You want them cooled down to about 55 degrees. in the refrigerator is a pitcher of whipped cream. So those are my two berries that I'm going to use. Actually, while I was making this, I was thinking, you know, wouldn't that be cool to have a layer of chocolate mousse and then a layer of raspberry mousse? So I think that would be a thing that you could try. I think I'd like to try that next. So, and this is my cream. I'm going to first get a cake. Yeah, and a cake. I'll take the top one. Let's get it. And that is there that. And then we take our cake. And we want to cut it in half. Now this is a nice sponge cake with lots of holes. I don't know if you can see that, but it's so wonderful and so moist. So what I did before was I took and I put white chocolate on this part here, and then I put in the freezer and it's set up, and then I flipped it over onto our cake plate. Yeah, okay, so this one's going to be just pretend. Okay, and then put that there, and then I'm going to take off the. You always trim the cakes. It's next to the cook. It shows you how moist the cake is. So moist. So get rid of that. All right. A springform pan. Right there. That's what we need. Right. Forgetting a step here. All right. Cake in the middle of the springform pan, and you see we have room around it. Now we're going to take our ladyfingers and cut them in half. Oops. All right. And we're just going to do like this. If you got them together, this is the coolest because you can just fit them all in like that. There's a bowl there with extra ladyfingers. And this was another recipe of ladyfingers I made, and the recipe called for them all to be separate, which is fine. But I just thought this is cool because you can just put them around, and otherwise when they're all separate, half of them will fall in. So we're going to do like that. So there we have our outside. And I'm sure that's pretty done there. Okay, set the timer for that one. I'm going to give that about 10 more minutes. And there's a cake tester there that this little sticking up. Yep. Okay. That little cake tester I had for the simplest little tool. It's just it's just a wire with a little circle on the end. A very sweet story. A mom in Head Start that I did a cooking class with, she told me her cookies were always too brown. And like it said, in 15 minutes, they looked like it just wasn't quite enough. But if she left them in for another 2 minutes, it looked like they were burnt. And so I told her that take them out when they look very much like they're almost done, but you're thinking they maybe need another minute, and just let them sit on the tray. And the tray will continue to cook them, but not as much as the oven would. And then if you wait like 5 minutes, you can pop them right off the tray, and they're just right. And she was so happy that the next time she came, she brought me this little cake tester. So I've had this for about 20 years now, for sure. And every time I pick it up, I think of her. Sweet lady. With that, it's looking like I'll let you test it. Okay. It looks like it's done here. Yep, I think you can take that out. Okay. I'm going to move that to there. And we have, does everyone trim their cakes? That looks good.
Why do you trim the cakes again, Terry?
Because you want all your stuff soaking in, keeps your cake moist. This is what all the bakeries do. I think I said last time, you can even grind them up and mix them with icing or something. You can make cake pops out of them. You can grind them up and use them for sprinkles on things that you're making.
And someone also had a question about the water and the gelatin. How much water do you use with those gelatin leaves? Just enough to get them real moist, or?
Yeah, it's kind of just to cover. It should be cold water. I had ice in the water.
Yeah.
And then like for a lot of the sponge cakes, we go around and we put a simple syrup on, and that will, it also moistens the cake. For our strawberry cake, that's what we did. And I know I had that cake in the refrigerator for a week, and it was still just as moist and nice as the first day. And you can add like a little liqueur if you want. I thought the blueberries were a little bit bland, so I added some Cointreau. You could hit them with some lemon juice. There's just, yeah, a lot of things you can do. This never hurts. It always perks it up. With the raspberries, you could add Chambord. Just little things while you're making it, you're thinking, it's not necessarily in the recipe, but how can I punch that up so that it's really flavorful? And so there's a lot of little things like that that you can do. So what I'm going to do is take, here's my blueberry mix. And then I'm going to use half of the whipped cream here. I'm going to fold these. In your recipe, it does not say to cook the blueberries very long, just the time it takes to melt the gelatin. I did that the first one I made, and I thought that the blueberry cream mousse part was so gray. It wasn't very colorful. So again, like blooming the gelatin, you can bloom the berries a little, bring out their color, cook them a little bit first, and then they give off a much better color. So we're just going to fold this so it's pretty smooth. And I see I have much better color than the gray color you'll see. the first one I had. And with everything, you just want to fold. Try not to deflate too much. It's going to deflate. I think we have. So we're going to just pour that in. That's our first layer. If you have your ladyfingers single, if you should choose to buy store ladyfingers, you may want to mix up your mousse a little, have trouble with them falling over. You can drop in little dabs of mousse to kind of hold them in place. You're kind of having an architectural project here. So there we have, and then we have our second layer. We're going to scooch that right down in there. Now, one thing I saw that it doesn't say on your recipe, but it's kind of cool to do, is just spread some whole raspberries on this. You could do it with the blueberries too. Just a few, but it'll jazz up your mousse. Okay, then we got our raspberry mousse. And I took the temperature. You want it to be 55 degrees if at all possible. It takes some measuring, testing and testing. I probably had the thermometer in it 10 times because it took most of the afternoon to get right. And then I did put it in the freezer for about 10 minutes. So,
What was the temperature you said, Terry?
pardon me?
What was the temperature exactly?
55. It shouldn't be much warmer than at 55 to 60. You want it cool enough so it doesn't entirely melt your cream. And you have to stir enough so that sure that the gelatin's all incorporated too. You're counting on your gelatin here to set you up. Now I've seen also where the last class, I used a fortified cream and I added mascarpone cheese when I started whipping. And that makes such a fine fortified cream that holds up for like a week. No oozing out, no water on the bottom. It's amazing and it tastes wonderful because mascarpone cheese is like a cream cheese, but cream cheese is made from milk and mascarpone cheese is made from cream. And then mixing it with the cream, it's just wonderful. So here we're going to pour a raspberry mousse. Now I got to this point last time and I still had this much of ladyfingers. So I put another layer and another raspberry on top. And so I think what we're gonna do is maybe I will have you take the cake out of the fridge and then replace it with this one and we'll let this one sit up. That's pretty heavy, but you're a strong girl. Yeah, so this is our finished charlotte, and I'm going to unmold it. Hands are good. Heart. So here is our strawberry charlotte cake. We can, I think, take it off the metal. Possibly. Oh. She's gonna come on. See if she's gonna come or not. Come on. Come on. Can trust you. Oh, you know, oh, so pretty. Okay, now the ganache. We're going to finish it the Swedish way for a Swedish cream cake. French might just put the whole top with berries, which is fine, which is wonderful. We could make flowers often too. You have raspberries around and flowers in the middle. There's 100 things. It's all your creativity, what you can think of to do decorating. I started this ganache about noon. And so I warmed it up with, I did pretty much 2-to-1 white chocolate and cream, heavy cream. And then warmed it, and so it's pretty runny, and then you just leave it naturally cool, and you have kind of a ribbony texture here. And we're going to put this, we're going to put some of this on the top. And spread that around. Offset. I don't need a short offset. I'm just going to spread that around. Make it a little bit more. Always buy good white chocolate. There's these things called candy melts that they sell in the store as white chocolate. It has no chocolate in it at all. This has like, good white chocolate is at least 30%. Yeah, that's what's the brand on that is Calvo. So I'm going to do that, and then the guitar is also good. And then we're going to start to set raspberries around the edge. You can. Any questions? We're pretty much getting to the end of our cake here. Just that one. Just a little busy work. Okay. Need our circle, and then I'm going to take a little bit of my raspberry jam, and then you just make some little swirls around. I'm going to put more in there, not as much. Yes.
Okay, someone had a question about the cup ratio for white chocolate to cream for the ganache. And I'm sorry if I missed other questions. My internet was bad for a little while there, so.
Oh, okay, well, they can maybe throw them out again. Yeah, You can do 2 to 1. I believe on your recipes there are ratios, 3 to 1, 4 to 1. What I did was put the chocolate or the white chocolate pieces in my cup here, and then I poured cream over until it had just covered the chips, the white chocolate pieces, and then heated it up. I used the microwave, and that at just a minute, and it melted. You just take it out and start mixing it, and you don't want to get it too hot, and then you just mix, and there'll be enough heat with the bowl here, and you just keep mixing, and then it's very loose, very runny, and you think, this isn't going to stand it. I probably did too much cream, but not at all. And so I think we can just put a little more raspberry. It's raspberry season and blueberry season. So it's really nice to do something special or something really different with your fruit, which this is kind of pretty different, I think. So I'm done with this. And maybe if I had a wet rag, I think, yeah. What time are we looking at? Oh, we're coming up to our, pretty good. I'm going to try to plate a piece so you can see what it looks like, and we'll hope that it looks good. It looks kind of pretty right now. And of course you can spend a lot more time. I was going to try to make some white chocolate roses and things. Didn't quite get to it today, but I think it's a pretty cake. And hope that some of you might like to try it. And the nicest thing about ladyfingers is you just slice right down the ladyfinger line.
And we do have another question, Terry. Do you need to double the mousse recipe? Is it listed per layer?
You don't need to double it at all. This is enough for a 10-inch cake. If you needed more, if you made your ladyfingers higher, if you wanted one more layer, I wouldn't go more than 3. And we do have a white chocolate crust on the bottom. Probably could have made it thicker, but I think it will be just enough. And the ladyfinger, 2 ladyfinger slices or 3 ladyfinger slices, however you want to do it. But the mousse is set up nicely. I like this one that the blueberry kind of has, you don't see the blueberry, so you can kind of see the blueberry seeds, which I think are.
Are there any other questions anyone would like to pose to the chat box?
And we do have one more of our cream cake specials with our Swedish princess cake coming up in September. I chose September because that's the official Princess Cake Month in Sweden. The 3rd week of September is actually the week where they sell thousands and thousands of princess cakes. It's named after a Swedish princess. Her nanny made her a special cake on her birthday that had all her favorite things, which included marzipan covering and cream and raspberry jam and sponge cake. And it's a beautiful cake. It's usually kind of molded round, and then we get a nice marzipan flower on the top, and I can show you how to make a marzipan flower, which is way more fun if we have our farm table class, because everybody made marzipan flowers to take home, which is pretty fun. So that's our coming up in September. And then next month we go to savory with some gazpacho using fresh garden vegetables, tomatoes and peppers and everything that's really coming on season-wise. And then I'm going to do this Tanzong technique for a sandwich loaf, which I've been making all summer. And it's the most wonderful bread. The thing about the Tanzong technique is it makes a really high-rising loaf that stays fresh for days, which doesn't often happen with your homemade bread. Usually you got to eat it the first day or the second day. And this, I had a sandwich for lunch today and it was ready in, I mean, it's been a week since I made and it was still moist. So that's coming up. So I hope maybe some people will sign up for that one also.
Yeah, great, Terry. So gazpacho and the fresh bread will be next month.
Yep.
Keep an eye on our website, folks, farmtablefoundation.org. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thank you, Terry, for all your efforts. I know it takes a lot of time to get ready for an hour class.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Good night.